live on Facebook for the
Not
Your Average Investor Show, Thursday edition. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez. And while we may not have Gregg Cohen with us today, we do have someone that has been at JWB for 10 years. He is the original head of the property management division, an entrepreneur in his own right who started his own division and headed it. He's now the senior account manager. He will be your Sherpa on your climb to the passive income summit. Father of three, consummate outdoorsman, and you may or may not know this, but they call him the LeBron James of JWB because he was employee number 6 and a champion in his own right. Mike Stetson, say what's up, Stats.
Hey, you guys. Wow, Pablo, thanks for the intro. I'm excited to be here and jump into our conversation today.
I was excited to deliver that intro with some new blood in here, man. I'm not gonna lie. So what'd you think of it?
Oh, it was strong. It's strong. Anytime I got a hype man building me up, it's gonna get my adrenaline firing.
Awesome, man. I love it. And Lee, I know that you're not making fun of me, buddy. I just love being made fun of. So I like calling it out, right? Like I really do like when people make fun of me. Like it is one of my favorite things in the world. So I appreciate you, bud. And welcome, Jake, with your trademark yo. So if you are new to this call, you may or may not be able to tell that we have a little community here that comes by on Tuesdays and Thursdays for our show, but we also welcome newcomers as we try to educate you on all things rental property investing. Feel free to contribute as much as possible. This show is for you. So the two ways that you do that is by popping open that chat button. And when you do that, right, the automatic text box above that, it says panelists in blue. If you drop that down and put panelists and attendees, you will be able to chat with not just us as panelists, but also your fellow attendees. And that way, there's some real educated investors on this call. Maybe they can give you another take on an answer. You can network and maybe even join our Facebook group later on. I'll tell you about that later. Also, if you want me to ask Mike, who I will most likely call Stets throughout this call because his name is Mike Stetson. If you want me to ask Mike a question, the best place to do that is in the Q&A box on the bottom right here. If you pop that open and put it in, that is the best place for me to keep track of it, because a lot of the times in the chat, I may lose it because people will start chatting and it gets buried and I got to go back. If it's in the Q&A, it's a little bit easier for me. I'm also monitoring a lot of things. I got the Facebook Live. I want to welcome anybody that's joining us on Facebook Live today as well. But the best place to get your question answered is this Q&A button. And last but not least, we have actually created this whole interface on the website where the number one question we ask is, where do we watch the live show when it's done? Now we have everything in one place. If you go to notyouraverageinvestorshow.com, you are able to see past episodes. You're able to get to the podcast. You're able to book a call with Mike. You're able to download our free investor kit that normally we would send you to jwbwebclass.com. You can go there too, right? But if you want that, there is a web class with Gregg Cohen for 45 minutes where he just explains the fundamentals of rental income properties, and you get to download the free investor kit, which includes this breakdown that we're going to be going over right now, and you'll be able to download that sheet, use it to your own benefit. I'm going to stop talking so much because nobody wants to listen to me. They want to listen to the great experience that thanks, buddy. I appreciate you, man. The great experience that Stets has as as like the tip of the spear for JWB out here and his 10 years of working with us. Mike, are you ready to share with us on the rental property of the week?
Week. Man, I can't wait. I'm fired up. I've been practicing my announcer voice all week long, so ready to get into it.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So first of all, I want to give everybody kind of the experience, right? So I know that if you're going to buy a property, I'm sure people get on the phone with you and they want to start looking at properties. They want to start looking at numbers. Is that how you start off, Mike, or do you take them down another path?
Yeah, I would say most people, when I first get a chance to introduce myself, want to start jumping into looking at properties and let's see what we've currently got available. But honestly, from our perspective, the properties themselves don't change that much. So they're not that important, right? And that's funny for me to say on the Property of the Week webinar here. But we really want to take some time with each person to make sure that our investment strategy, the Jacksonville market, rental properties in general, are all going to be congruent with what you're looking for in terms of your long-term financial plan. So we're going to take a step back and we're going to talk high level. We're going to talk about what you're looking for, what JWB can do. We're going to go through our tracking and reporting and just give you that insight into what it's like to be a client with us first and answer a lot of your questions. And then we'll move forward to getting into specific properties and putting together your long-term game plan.
That sounds good, man. And you know what? Mike Foster, who is a regular and a client, he's already kind of ahead of the game here, buddy. If you want to start pulling up that portal, because Mike is asking, without displaying anyone's personal information, can you show us some screenshots of the typical views available to JWB investors in their turnkey investment portal? And well, bam, there it is. Mike, you want to talk us kind of through what we're looking at and how you start off these calls?
Absolutely. And I saw your question, Mike, and I thought you were in our pre-meeting here trying to get ready for our show. But that's exactly where I wanted to start our conversation off, is let's give you an idea of what a portfolio looks like and really what visibility you have as a client into your portfolio with us. And so what I've got pulled up here, we call this our client ROI report. And I'm sure you've heard Greg mention it and Pablo reference it in the past. But this is the user interface that we go over with our clients once a month, where we're able to see exactly what's going on with your properties, how's your portfolio performing. You get a phone call from your portfolio manager. I mean, it's the same person that's calling you at the same time to go over this information. So we believe in that long-term relationship and communication, and having these tools at your disposal to see what's going on, essentially real time, is so critical. So this is where we start. Let's go through, and this is an actual client. I've just taken out names and a lot of personal information, but you can see exactly what we're able to track here, right? And like I was mentioning just a moment ago, we're going to start with what's your game plan, right? Is this something that's supposed to be your long-term rental portfolio? Are you looking for shorter term results? Is this about retirement? What are the numbers that you're looking to achieve with your passive income? And that's something that I would say a lot of investors, whether you're new or old in terms of real estate investing, really struggle with. And so what we can do is really take some time to put that together, to see what our goals and objectives are. And then once you have the roadmap, well, now we're just following it, right? And that's really what our conversation with our clients really becomes as we go forward.
I love it, Mike. So is it safe to say here that these numbers on the left, right? Lifetime goal, current milestone, number of properties, those are numbers that you help the client come up with. And then the numbers on the right in this interface are kind of like the performance of what's happening. Is that what I'm looking at?
Exactly right. So you can see the left-hand side. This is the game plan, right? This is that roadmap I was mentioning, right? What are we trying to do? What's the cash flow goal that we're working towards? And then really the most important question that we can answer here is, how many properties do you need to purchase to get you to where you want to be? And that's a real key question that most investors don't know. I think a lot of people like to say as many as I can get, right? But let's be strategic about it. Let's be efficient about what we're trying to do. So once we've got this roadmap here, well, then you can see right next to that, you get your KPIs, your key performance indicators. So now every month, every 30 days, our accounting team is updating this for you with actual numbers from rent collected, maintenance expenses, what's going on with your properties. And then we can track what's my return, what's my cash flow in this net rental income section. We can see our total return when we talk about the different profit centers that are going to come into play here. When we talk about your cash flow, tax savings, and principal pay down, those are the items that we're able to track and pay attention to when we're communicating our returns to you.
I love it, man. And, we're not going to spend too much time here. We can come back here during Q&A and go a little bit deeper if people want to see it. But I think this is a good time to talk about in general, because we're going to get into the profit centers, right? But why don't you tell us what the profit centers are in rental income properties for anybody that's joining us new, so that they can understand what the difference between this lifetime net rental income and lifetime total return is.
Yeah, okay. So when you break it down, I'm going to start off with cash flow. And when we talk returns, there's a lot of different ways to calculate them. And what we do here is we're going to take what's your cash flow, what are the actual dollars that are hitting your bank account. And so what is my rent collected, and then what is my mortgage payment, my property taxes, insurance, management fees, any of those costs with your property, that's going to be deducted out. And what's left over, that's your net cash flow, right? That's your net rental income here. But that's not the only, I guess, way that you can derive profit from a rental home, right? In addition to that, you're going to have, if you buy a property with a loan, like most of our clients do, you've got a renter that's making that mortgage payment for you. And part of that mortgage payment every month is going towards principal reduction. So you're going to be creating equity in that home just through the monthly payments that your renter is making for you. So now we're able to factor in the impacts of that equity over time from principal pay down. And then in addition to that, you've got tax advantages from depreciation. So when we're looking at this total return that I'm highlighting here of 10.3%, that's going to factor in those profit centers of tax savings and principal pay down. But there's another one that's in here that we don't include in here, and that's the property appreciating. If it's growing in value over time, then that's going to be another profit center in a growth market like Jacksonville. But what we're highlighting and we're focusing here is not factoring in that property growth.
Got it. And I think, why don't you, obviously Gregg explains it so many times on why you don't factor in that property growth. For anybody new, why is it that you don't include appreciation, even though it is a major source of profit for somebody that holds for a long term?
Yeah, I would say it really can fluctuate, right? When you talk about what we really want to communicate with our clients, we really focus on controllable factors, okay? And that's really a way that you can minimize your risk is by focusing on those factors that are most in your direct control. And when you look at appreciation, that's part of real estate investing. And when you're doing your market homework, are you looking for areas of the country that should appreciate and have that growth over time? Then you can reasonably expect that. However, it's impossible essentially to time over a long horizon. We really can't control market cycles. We know they happen, right? There's going to be ups and downs with economic cycles, with real estate over time. But in the long run, if you're not so focused on timing top and bottoms, that property should continue to appreciate, right? But that's not the centerpiece of why our clients are investing, right? When you take a look at, let me point you back to my ROI report here. The reason why we're investing is for the cash flow goal, right? We're looking primarily for the income stream that these properties can produce. And so we do focus on that in our returns. And principal pay down and tax savings are essentially straight line calculations. Those are direct controllable items that are going to correlate with your real estate purchase. But market cycles, appreciation, that property asset growth, that's a little bit more fluctuating.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So I think now we can hit on that more, but right now it's time for the other star of the show, apart from Newstead's, to shine. And that is, what do we call it? The JWB Property Rental Income Property of the Week. Week. Yeah. I love it. So we're looking at 1179 Woodruff Avenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we like to, by the way, something I didn't prepare you for. So just throwing you out there. Two things.
Right.
One, I didn't tell you that I was going to, yeah. I didn't tell you that I was going to make you sound, I was going to test to see if you're like right in line with what Gregg says about appreciation. But I also didn't tell you, we repurpose this stuff for podcast, right? So when we go through this property income breakdown here, I'm trying to talk through some of the stuff that we're seeing, right? So that once our friend that in the future right now is listening to us in their ear, they can see it, right? So I'm just going to kind of talk through it. This is it looks like a beautiful 2-story house with an attached garage, price point of $240,000, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. It has an estimated rent range of between $1,625 and $1,675. And normally what we talk about the most is this return here, which is what you really, really want to be looking at. It's coming in at a whopping $273 in cash flow per month, which is one on the higher end of the things that we've highlighted here on the show, and a really, really nice 9.64% conventional financing total ROI. Mike, Am I right in saying that this is a really nice high cash flow property in relation to usual ones?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would say typically we expect our properties to be between 150 to a little over 200,000 is usually where our properties come in at. This particular property is in an area of Jacksonville where it's, comparable sales and properties around it are more expensive. So that's why it's going to be a little bit higher in our typical price range here.
Okay, so that is the price point of the house, right? So at 240, it is higher than usual, but it is still in line. Does that make the monthly cash flow higher in general when it's a higher purchase price?
Yeah, let me walk you through it, because when you look at cash flow, and this is why having the spreadsheets and having these property evaluations is so important, because when you're just looking at high level numbers, rent versus price, it really doesn't tell you the full story. And so when you really get down to, like you were just mentioning, Pablo, the cash flow at $273 a month is going to be on the higher side for what we typically see, but it's still in line with what our typical properties are. It's not out of the ballpark, right? And the reason for that is we do have a higher purchase price at $240,000, but it's also in an area of Jacksonville where properties are more expensive and also rents are going to be higher. So as we go through, you see this particular property is going to rent on a 2 to 3 year lease, just like any of the other properties that we've highlighted in the past. And this one's going to rent at $1,650 a month is where we're expecting this one to come in at. Okay. Now, you'll see why did the returns shake out about the same? Because now we can go through the particular line items. And one of the big factors here, and I think it's already been highlighted in the comments, is the property taxes are almost $4,000 for this area, right? And that's because the higher purchase price, you're going to have higher property taxes that go along with it, okay? Your insurance expense is going to be a little bit lower than, let's say, one of our rehab properties, but in line with our other new construction homes. So your insurance costs will be a little bit lower. And then you've got property management fee that's a little bit higher because that's based off the higher rent. So when you do really shake out all of those individual components, your cash flow and then your ultimate return on investment is going to fall in line just like any other property that we have in our inventory.
Nice, man. That's really, really well explained. So at the end of the day, what matters most is this area that I'm highlighting here, the cash flow and the return on investment. And those numbers are really what you are, when you are putting in inputs on the left side, it's all about that output that you're going to come in, right? So if it is a higher purchase price, there's going to be a couple of, it'll come with a higher rent. It's also going to come with a higher couple of other expenses, but then percentage wise, and cash flow wise, it's kind of even out to put it in line with a lower purchase price and the different things. There is something else that I want to note here. This house, the last couple of houses we've done, right? Like after going through these a bunch, this house is pretty clear to me that it looks like a quintessential JWB new construction house. While when we highlight these the newly renovated houses, they always look a little bit more different. Can you talk to me about the difference between a new construction house and a newly renovated home, and whether that should affect my purchase decision, or why or why not?
Yeah, that's another great question. So, I mean, the main differences are going to be a year build, right? So you mentioned when I look at a new construction house with JWB, I can tell it's a JWB house, right? And if you're local in Jacksonville, you drive around the streets, you can see our houses, right? They're all built with the same materials. They have the same paint colors. They look almost identical from the exterior. Well, that same concept is still going to be applied towards our renovation homes too. Now, the exterior of the property, the envelope's not going to look identical because each home is unique, right? In terms of year build and the floor plan and the style, but the interior of the properties and really the fundamentals of the property are going to be identical, right? Very, very similar. And what I mean by that with an older home is we're going to look at those big ticket items like the roof, the plumbing, the electrical. We want to pay attention to the guts of a renovation property. That's where you need to spend your money, because the purpose of this is for it to be a long-term performing rental home, right? So the purpose of new construction and renovations is identical, right? We both want them to attract a good long-term renter. The properties themselves need to be very comparable. they could be literally right next door to each other. So there's not a big difference in the property itself. And like you were referencing, Pablo, what we're really buying is that rental amount, that income stream. That's really what we're going to be purchasing. So the real question is, am I buying this particular property at $240,000 and thereby it's going to require more of my money up front? Or am I buying a property at $160,000 and it's got a lower purchase price? But the performance, the renter that's going to move into those properties, that's not going to be different either way.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So now I want to, so that makes sense, right? Like you guys are, and I know we talked about this before, right? But like, I feel like you get a lot of questions on like this house or that house. At the end of the day, when you're selling these homes, they're basically widgets to you, right? Like they all have a very similar way that they're going to perform for you. And it's less about this house or that and more about, you know, down payment that you want to put down and how many different ones you want to buy kind of thing, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I would break that down in two ways, right? So going back to differences of properties, the difference in particular properties is really going to be the renter that moves into your home. That's really the key variable. Whether it's a 2-story, a 1-story, a 2020 year build, a 1960 year build, that's not going to really alter your returns. What is going to alter the returns is, does my renter stay for 2 years, 4 years, 8 years? That's going to be more of the variable. So when you're thinking of, and we look at properties, it's not about one house is better than the other one, right? It's really important for my team, the property management team, to find those right renters that are going to move into those properties, stay for a couple of years. And if we're doing that, then the property should perform like we expect. So it's not so much about property unique differences. And another way to visualize that, going back to the spreadsheets, is I'll point your attention to that bottom box on the screen here, the property assumptions. And you'll notice that we have our vacancy rate is we're using 3%, and we're going to use 4% for our maintenance rate for these new construction homes. And if we were to compare that, and you've probably seen them on previous properties that we've highlighted that are the older homes, the vacancy rate for a rehab house is exactly the same, 3%. There's no difference in performance, right? The difference is going to be, what do you expect in that long-term maintenance expense? And so we're going to use 6% for a renovation home versus a new construction expense of 4%. So account for what you're expecting, what you're preparing for, and your performance shouldn't be any different.
That's a really good explanation, Mike. And I got 2 more questions I want to get through with you. And then I'm going to dive into these comments because we got a nice like spread between the ROI tool and this property and stuff like that. We're going to get to everybody's questions. You mentioned the performance of the tenant, and you are the OG property management guy, right? So like, that sounds like something that is impossible to control, the performance of the tenant. But now that I've been here for a minute, I realize that JWB does take some very interesting, unique approaches on how you minimize that vacancy rate. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and that certainly, I think, biases my perspective in terms of the importance of property management. I haven't done it personally myself for a long time, but that's really the key, is making sure you find a good renter, and if they stay there for a couple of years, then you're in great shape to hit your returns, right? And so I would say that the way that we go about really doing that is focusing on it. And it's a simple statement, but most property managers, when you really talk to them, aren't focused on long-term results, right? They really don't emphasize length of stay. Whereas with our team, since we manage properties, we're working with real estate investors, we know that is the most important thing, is how long does your renter stay. So you really need to put your effort and your focus into finding long-term renters and then keeping them, right? So that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when that lease is up, they don't want to move out, okay? And once again, it's going to sound rather simple, but the ways to do that, one, are to look for them, right? To market and to only attract 2 to 3 year lease terms. So if you're somebody that's a short-term individual, I move in, I move out, I trash houses, well, don't come work with us, right? We're looking for that long-term resident. And then we want to take care of you. We want to make sure that your needs are taken care of. When you call our office, someone answers, follows back up with you. We're not here to be taken advantage of, a free maintenance. And, if anything you need, we're going to bend over backwards and, spend a lot of money to make sure you're never having to buy another light bulb again, right? That's not the purpose. But if you do take care of people fairly, right, and treat them with respect and give them a lot of value, then when they have the option to move out, people generally don't, right? And that's really the key, is having that property management attitude of finding renters that are planning on being in that house for a long period of time, and then let's do what we can to make sure they do.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah. And I agree. Like you guys definitely take this like long-term relationship building approach, not just with your investors, but also with your tenants, right? Like you call them your residents, right? Like they stay there for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, which has clearly shown through during this COVID crisis, right?
Yeah.
The last thing I want to do here, based on my own wants and needs here, is I want to talk about that appreciation rate, Mike. So you mentioned that you don't factor in appreciation rate into your ROIs because you can't control the length of the stay, the length of the ownership of an investor. But as long as they stay in for a full market cycle, which is typically 10 to 20 years, it can be fairly predictable. And I happen to know that the predictable market cycle rate of Jacksonville, even if you go before the Great Recession to now, has been 4.3% historically. So I wanted to populate here, if you add that 4.3%, just to show anybody that hasn't been through one of these, how these numbers change. And the first thing that pops out of my head is that it went from having a 9.8% ROI on this financing, on this conventionally financed ROI, to a 25.27% when you just add 4.3% appreciation rate. Can you explain to us what's happening there?
Yeah. So, and I say before we really drive down into the impact on the ROI from that 9 to 25%, I want to point you back to the box right above it when we talk about cash flow, because I always am going to focus on that first. When we include appreciation, that doesn't change your cash flow at all, right? That's going to be constant. That's based off your fixed costs, your mortgage payment if we have one. So appreciation doesn't impact your cash flow. So that's why we really are breaking those two apart. But to your point, Pablo, over a long period of time, you can see the majority of your returns on a rental property can be derived from the appreciation. When you're talking about 4% a year, that's going to compound as we go out in time. And so essentially what you're talking about with a property of over $200,000 is that's about $8,000 a year in appreciation that your asset is doing. So not only is it generating a monthly cash flow for you, but that asset itself is increasing in value in a growth market like Jacksonville is. So it's something to certainly to look at, be aware of. It's part of owning a rental property, and more for a lot of our clients, why we're choosing to purchase properties in Jacksonville. But as you can see, that's not the centerpiece cash flow item, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I also want to, I also want to clear up, right? Like on a cash flow purchase, if you purchase it in cash or if you purchase it in your retirement account, like we also have above in these boxes, it doesn't jump up as much as financing. Can you explain kind of the trigger of why using financing makes it jump up so astronomically?
Yeah, well, remember the benefit of using financing is you're only having to buy this house with 25% of the total purchase price. So not only are you able to leverage, meaning I can put less money down to control the total asset, but you're also leveraging the appreciation, right? So that really is going to be able to start compounding over time, because return on investment is always going to be based off of the amount of money that you're putting into the investment. So the lower amount of capital that I put into it, the higher my returns go. And then I've got leverage on top of that. You're really going to get that multiplier effect.
There you go, man. Nailed it. So, all right, now we're going to get into the question and answer. We have 8 questions here in the queue. Amazing. Thank you so much. Like you all that are here with us in the show, you drive this show, right? So we're trying to be as serve you as well as possible. So the more questions, the better. And we're going to kick it off with the guy that actually, you know what? I'm going to start with the property questions first. So that way we can not have to mess around too much with changing the interface here. Make it easy. Guillermo Montes asks, is this a B plus or A minus neighborhood and tenant profile?
Yeah, so when I talk neighborhood ranking and quality, that ABC scale, I would say we're generally going to be more in a C type of neighborhood. And I usually prefer to equate it on a numerical scale from 1 to 10. I just find that's a little bit more descriptive. But to use the same kind of concept, a C type of neighborhood, I'm going to equate it on that 1 to 10 scale, where a 10's the best, 1's the worst, a 5's in the middle. Normally, we're in your 3's and your 4's, right? So we're going to be below middle class. I think another way to think about this, Guillermo, is if you want to be in that middle price range in Jacksonville, the median price today is about $250,000. So this particular property is getting pretty close to that. You see our price points at $240,000. So we're pretty close to that middle median price of property here with this particular one. But in general, I would say our properties are going to be right below that middle. We're going to be in those 3's and 4's. It's a mixture neighborhood in terms of owners and renters. It's blue collar. It's an area where you look at the purchase price, right? Where we can find homes in that 150 to 200,000 range, where we can get rents where we need to cover your costs and create that positive cash flow. But most importantly, it attracts the long-term renter.
Why wouldn't I want to invest in a 10 or an A neighborhood?
Yeah, you can. I wouldn't say you can't, but if your purpose is to buy a property to generate monthly income, you're going to have a real tough time generating cash flow the higher you go in purchase price. Because we touched on it a little bit earlier, but as I go higher in purchase price, the other factors of this investment are going to tick up too. I'm going to have higher property taxes. I'm going to have higher insurance costs. Your expenses get higher as you go higher in purchase price, and rent doesn't go up in a linear fashion. They're not exactly correlated. So just because your purchase price goes up doesn't mean your rent's going to go up at the same pace so that I can generate the cash flow like I could if my property was a little bit lower priced. So that's the sweet spot that you have to find, is where are the prices of property where you can make that monthly cash flow, but you got to be aware of going too far in that scale and looking at properties that I would say are too low in purchase price, because then your neighborhood quality and that renter that you're ultimately going to be attracting is not the individual that's going to stay there for a couple of years. So you've really got to find that sweet spot of purchase price versus rents, but I would say most importantly with an eye towards long-term rental stays.
I like how you explained that, Mike. That is slightly different than the way that Gregg explains it, but I think your context added a lot of value, man. Good job with that one. So Chad Willis has a question. What are the comps for other homes in this area?
Yeah, and that's where our purchase price is always derived, is from comparable sales. So we're always looking at homes that are sold and basing our purchase price off of that.
Perfect. So short answer is around the same price.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, got it. So, all right, here we go. Brad Suiro, who is a new client and investor.
Yeah.
Welcome,
Hey, Brad.
Welcome. And a regular on the show. Welcome, Brad. It's great to have you here. Well, I thoroughly enjoy pronouncing your last name. So Brad Suiro asks, with regards to the estimated annual insurance cost on a property with an existing tenant in place, is that figure based on what JWB is actually paying for the existing in-force policy, or is it strictly an estimate based on previous similar properties?
I would say this is going to be an estimate based off of what our clients would be paying for purchasing this home, right? Now, our exact insurance cost is a little bit different than a typical investor. We're a company. We've got additional coverage that we're going to have in place here. But I think to answer your question the best, Brad, is our insurance teammate, Ritchie Insurance Group, is actually providing this information to us if we're talking one of our renovated homes. When we're getting ready to purchase it, we're doing this analysis so we have these accurate numbers when we're making our buying decisions and putting together our formulas too. It's a little bit easier to project what your insurance cost is going to be on a new construction home because we do build the same ones, right? And so the same houses and the same floor plans, literally the same exact floor plan, will have the same insurance cost as the ones in the past. So it's going to be based off of a real number that we're expecting you to be paying as a client.
Okay, so it is a real number. We've discussed this on past calls as well, right? You have Ritchie Insurance that is an in-house, but it is very, very tied to your business. So you get real live insurance costs when you are being presented this. It's specific to the property itself.
Yeah, and just a real quick point here, Pablo, where there's a lot of question marks when you're putting together and doing your property analysis, and so I think a key point here is you can really drive down a lot of those unknowns and uncertainties by doing it repeatedly. Once again, by building the same houses, by rehabbing houses in the same areas, the same way, the same standard, that drives down a lot of that uncertainty and unknowns. So another concept that I like to introduce my clients to is this is really about predictability. Right? We know what should happen with the property. We know there's risk involved. People move out, things break, there's ups and downs, but all of these variables, taxes, insurance, length of stay, we should know that pretty well because of our experience and having similar homes in these same neighborhoods and tracking it by having that information available to our team to make decisions off of. So now it's really about replicating and repeating and essentially having these properties perform like we expect within this range of maintenance and vacancy so that we can hit our returns. And so the more you're doing the same thing, the more predictable those results should be.
Beautifully articulated, Mike. That's great. That's a great, you don't think about it often, right? But insurance is in case stuff happens. And the more that you do something over and over and over again, the more you're able to foresee stuff that could happen. So it makes perfect sense that you are able to get better and better insurance rates as well. That's cool. So Mike Foster has a question. Speaking of renters, Gregg has previously mentioned that JWB only offers 2 to 3 year leases. If a tenant gets a 2-year lease, the investor is going to lose a few thousand extra dollars in maintenance and vacancy costs versus a 3-year lease. Can JWB investors request only 3-year leases? So first I want to say, is that an accurate assumption? Is a 2-year versus 3-year lease an automatic cost to the property owner?
I wouldn't say it's automatic because, Mike, remember, there's a really good chance that renter is going to renew their lease. So even if it's a 2-year lease, there's a 70% chance that that's going to get extended beyond that. So your original length of lease, I don't think is really the best predicator of what your turnover costs are going to be, right? We have just as good a chance of extending that 2-year lease as we do a 3-year lease. So your length of stay that we're averaging right now is 54 months. So we're over 4 years is when we're going to start to expect having that turnover come into play. Okay.
Okay. So then we can just answer. So I awesome. Can an investor request only 3-year leases even despite all that?
Yeah, I would say, Mike, generally we want to have our team is trying to get the best, or I'd say the longest lease term we can for you. Absolutely. Now, we know how important it is to avoid turnover cost. But once again, this is a balance of if we only are going to require a 3-year lease, as good as our team is at working with residents to get a 3-year lease, there's some people that just aren't going to be comfortable with that. And so essentially you're going to be excluding a segment of your rental population that in the long run could increase your vacancy risk. So the way to reduce vacancy risk isn't by only requiring a 3-year lease initially, but once again, it's by focusing on the renewal and keeping a renter in that property beyond that 2 to 3 year lease term.
Perfect. All right. So that makes sense. So you are shooting for a 3-year lease. That is that is the way that you present it, but you will go back to a 2-year lease knowing that the incremental effort of getting a 3-year lease is not as positive as getting a renter in place, yet it's way more positive than going for a 1-year lease just to get a renter in place because you guys have those systems figured out and you have enough flow of potential residents.
Yeah, 1 year is absolutely not going to work in terms of reducing that risk. And this is really going back to, I think, another way to think about this, Mike, is we all want the same thing, right? And this is, once again, a key concept of working with JWB is with us as your property manager, we're focused on hitting those returns or beating them so you continue to buy more properties with us, right? And as we've done this over time, we've been able to analyze really what's the best way to drive down that vacancy risk. Is it by essentially requiring a longer term lease? I mean, to just kind of walk that out, would a 4-year lease term initially reduce my vacancy cost, right? And so that's where you're really driving down the people that would move into your property. So it's a balancing act, right? Who's somebody that I can move into long enough to comfortably cover my turnover cost when it does happen, but I also want my property to be attractive enough to the most available pool of renters to work from. And then the way you drive down that vacancy is not by the initial lease term, but essentially by deferring the move out, right? By doing what you can to keep that renter in there as long as possible.
All right, cool. So we have a question here from an anonymous attendee that says, if I finance 40%, do you entertain non-recourse loan? The reason is I am using IRA self-directed account to pay. Thanks.
Yeah, great question. And we don't talk about it too much. It's a pretty specific method of purchase for our clients, but we do have a lot of clients that are buying properties inside your IRA or your 401k. So you're using your retirement account. And if you do want to get a loan in there, as you can see on our screen, we do have non-recourse lenders available that we work with here. So your down payment's going to be 50%, 40 to 50% down, a little bit higher interest rate compared to conventional financing. And you can see we're still able to generate $132 a month in positive cash flow. And with the numbers here, including appreciation, about a 9% return.
Excellent. And Misty has a couple of questions here. Do investors obtain insurance through their own insurance companies or through JWB's insurance company? I think we kind of just hit on this, but you can answer that simply.
Yeah, just real quick, I would say most of our clients are electing to use our insurance team because of that visibility and relationship that we have. But you can use whatever insurance teammate you would like to.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you're paying, you are trying to be a passive investor, right? So if JWB is presenting with you already the turnkey best thing that they, provide, I would assume it's in your best interest to be as passive as you can, right?
Yeah. And I would say the most important thing is surrounding yourself with teammates that are working for the same objective, right? And that's once again where we know the Ritchie Insurance Group, they think like investors do. This is not about a one-off premium. This is about helping our clients build their portfolio. And the lower the cost for insurance, the better the coverage, the better the service, then the more everybody is winning. Yeah,
true story. I was just talking to the Ritchies. They've bought like 4 properties since February, right?
Rich is on fire.
They're on fire. Misty also asks, does your lease require tenants to carry renter's insurance?
It does not. We encourage it, and that's something that we do review during our lease signing. And just to touch on that, we do take an hour with each person that is moving into our properties to go through the lease to make sure we get a chance to go over all of these items. So we do encourage renter's insurance, but we don't require it because from the property owner's point of view, it doesn't benefit you. It's not giving you any coverage or protection. This is really going to be focused on the renter's possessions, let's say. So it's not going to essentially put any money in your pocket if something were to go bad. Now, that's why we have our own insurance policy.
All right. And Chad Willis has a couple of related questions, and it's on a lease renewal, what is the cost to the investor and what is the average turnover cost when someone moves out?
Yeah. So our renewal fee is going to be $200 for each year they renew. So let's say we've got a 3-year lease and someone extends for another year, then there would be a $200 renewal charge. Say they renew for 2 years, then it would be $200 per year for a total of $400. Okay. And the total turnover cost today that we're averaging is right around $2,800 is going to be that top line expense before any security deposits or any other monies are applied to it.
All right. And then Marilyn also, because we're on this lease kick. If they sign a 2-year lease and then want to renew at 1 year, can they do that option?
Yes. So we will not move somebody into a house for 1 year. That's not enough time. But you don't kick somebody out of a house because they only want to stay for another year, right? Remember, the most important thing is occupancy. So we want to do everything we can to encourage our person to remain in that property. Let's take care of our renter. You want to renew for a year, great. But we're just not going to move you into a property for 1 year. Well, that's just not enough length of time to cover your move-out costs.
I did not see that coming, but that's interesting, right? I immediately, my head went to, no, you're trying to do this long-term stuff, but it makes sense. You want somebody not to move,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly
keeping
right.
them in is in the best benefit of the investor. Whereas a property management company that isn't tied into your own profit centers would want to say, no, let's kick him out and let's get somebody better in, because they make the money on on tenant placement fees, as opposed to JWB, who makes the money by getting you to buy more investment rental properties, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
That makes a lot of sense. Chad Willis asks, can I use whatever lender I want?
We do require you to work with one of our approved lenders that we work with. We want to make sure that we can close this loan in about, let's say, 30 to 45 days from now. So we've got a team of lenders that are investor friendly and are committed to providing great service to our team and to our clients. So we do introduce you to somebody we work with.
Okay, great. And Roger Evans asks, if a renter signs a 2-year lease, then decides to leave after 1 year, does the investor obtain the cost for breaking the lease?
Yes, I would say, Roger, right? Where, somebody does break a lease, they do forfeit their security deposit. They also have their next month's rent that is paid as liquidated damages. So any money that we're able to collect back from the renter through liquidated damages, that security deposit, any damages on top of that is all going to be sent directly to you as the property owner.
All right. And Lee asks, is there a maintenance cost associated with a house that has a tenant renew their lease?
A maintenance cost with a resident that renews their lease, there wouldn't be a maintenance cost, but there'd be the renewal fee. There would be the $200 renewal fee, but there wouldn't be a maintenance expense with that.
Got it. So there's no like tenant improvement when they renew, but there is a small fee for renewing the lease, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okie dokie. Are you ready to get into the property, the ROI report? I want to make sure that we hit some of those questions.
Yeah, great.
And while you're popping that in, Mike Foster has I think a question that everybody always asks when they're investing in Florida. Have any JWB properties ever experienced hurricane damage that led to significant out-of-pocket expenses for investors? And does the homeowner's insurance on each property provide for hurricane damage coverage?
Yeah, so I'll answer that one, that last part first. So yes, the insurance policy that we've been discussing and that has been highlighted on the spreadsheets does include hurricane coverage. And so your deductible is a 2% deductible versus the standard deductible, but you're covered from named storms. We haven't had a lot of problems, let's say, with catastrophic damage from hurricanes. We've been, managing properties for over 10 years, and we've had a lot of storms come through. So there has been damage, and generally it's more yard cleanup. We've had tree limbs fall in yards. We've had tree limbs damage property and, knock roof damage. So there has been some, repairs and expenses from storm cleanup, but nothing catastrophic.
Awesome. And there's a chat going on here on the side. Denise is asking, when you feature these properties of the week, are they just pieces of your portfolio, or are you featuring them because they are currently for sale and available to investors? So Denise, they are generally currently for sale. Now, what is happening right now, and Mike, you can interrupt me if I'm wrong here, but like right now we're having a very rapid sales volume. So often we feature these properties and they're either like sold later that afternoon, or in the case of this house, it actually got sold a day or so ago, and we were already planning on featuring this one because it had some good speaking points. But that's the answer, right? So like they are always, they're not just homes that we buy and hold and then we talk about something in a vacuum. It's a deal that is either happening that is for sale, or it has happened in the last like 2-3 days as we're planning, after we planned for the show. That's fairly accurate, right, Mike?
Absolutely, Denise. So these are properties that we make available for sale, and either they've sold recently or will be sold in the upcoming days. So I would say the intention of highlighting properties like we are here is not necessarily to draw attention to purchase this particular property, right? But we really want you to be able to explain the returns, what our properties look like. And once again, the point for us is to always have 20 to 30 homes that look a lot like the home that we're highlighting. Some are going to be $240,000. Some are going to be $150,000. Some are brand new. Some are built in 1970s. So there's different properties, but once again, they're going to be very similar. So we want to highlight a property so we can talk about some particular things. We do identify a property that just became available for sale generally, but there is a chance that it could be purchased before we get a chance to highlight it here during our conversation today. But if you like the particular property, we've got another one right behind it, right? That's really the method.
Yeah, there you go. So sorry, Denise, I didn't see that was happening in the chat because I'm more focused in the Q&A, but just wanted to put it out there. These are not business school examples. These are real properties that are being sold. But like Stet said, we're not trying to sell you this house. We're just trying to educate you on a similar deal of exactly what you would sign up for if you were to come and give you a real life example. All right, man. So let's get into this. Let's get into this ROI portal. Mike Foster asks, does the investor portal include views of any other investment data? For example, an itemized list of expenses each month, rental income received each month, etc. And is there an annual summary page made available for tax reporting?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So I don't want to get too deep down into it, but yeah, absolutely. When we talk about the intention of this report is to give you that actionable information, right? So we were focusing on the high level, but just to scroll down real quick, you can see we do have an itemized breakdown of each individual property. We have the returns tracked year over year. We can compare that versus what our initial expectations were when we purchased the property. So we have that accountability right in front of us. And then you also can drop down the menu for each of your properties, and then you can see everything's going to be broken down here and itemized out between rent collected, maintenance, management fees, property taxes. Everything's going to be broken down here for you. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That is a good look on good visibility right there. So
yep.
Cecile Germain.
And year end too. I'm sorry, Pablo. And year end as well. So this is updated every 30 days. So this is really a snapshot of historical performance and where we are at the moment. At year end, we do have year end accounting between your 1099 and the Schedule E that will provide the same breakdown that you can provide to your accountant.
All right. So Cecile Jamay asks, good morning, Mike.
Hey, Cecile.
Is the tool you all right. Is the tool you she must be on the West Coast, right? If she's saying good morning, right? It's coming up on 1:25 here for us out here on the East Coast. Good morning, Mike. Is the tool you demonstrated earlier a tool your investors can have access to directly and pull the investment they currently have with you? Is this tool also can it build what if case scenarios for investors to use?
I wouldn't say we're in what if type of scenarios. What we really use this, I would say, Cecile, is primarily to communicate what's happening with your property so you can have that visibility into rent and expenses and have that tracking. And really it's about accountability versus what we expected. So this isn't really designed to create permutations or potential scenarios in the future, versus really be able to focus on what's happened in the past and where we are at the moment to make sure we're tracking against the returns like we were thought.
Awesome. And good news, Cecile, that the tool that I was just manipulating, right? That rental, the property of the week breakdown that you would get whenever they send you, if you go to jwbwebclass.com and download the investor package, that's a great what if scenario, right? Like you can definitely manipulate those numbers around as I've been doing, and that will populate through the sheet and tell you your full ROI and rental income and stuff like that. Yep. Is that accurate, Mike? Right.
Yeah, you can definitely use the evaluations. And remember, Cecile, too, during your monthly conversation with your portfolio manager, we can go over this with you as well. So, you should have the ability to log in. We've got this reporting here. We're going over this with you monthly if needed so that we can have these conversations. Okay. All
right. Mike, can I get you to stop sharing this so that when I repurpose the next question, it's your big, beautiful face in the middle of the screen?
You got it.
So real quick, do you have what's your hard stop at, Mike? Because we're coming up on 1:30. I don't know if you got other calls and we got a bunch of people still on with a couple more questions. Can you hang out long? Do you have a hard stop?
I can hang out for a little bit. I got a little bit more time.
Give me a hard stop time just so I can have that in mind when I'm going through stuff.
Yeah, sure. I blocked off till 2. So I think I'm good.
All right. We're here all day, baby. Okay. So then we can get to this question. Lee Bishop always asking the good human question here, right? So Lee Bishop asks, Mike, how much of a challenge was it for you? Sorry, I'm not reading well right now. Lee Bishop asks, Mike, how much of a challenge for you was it to go from the property manager arm of JWB to the client relations side of JWB?
Yeah, it's a great question. One I haven't had asked in a long time, I would say. It was tough, tougher than I thought. I would say there's pros and cons to everything, right? And the hardest part about leaving property management was that it was my baby. You know, when you really think about it, starting it off, if you want to know the story, my good friends, Adam Riegel was working here, right? And Adam Eisen, and they kind of convinced me to manage properties. I didn't really know what I was doing. So I just started off with the company's 30 homes and then really just started learning on the fly and building up systems and processes and building a business, right? And then 5 years later, just ready for the next chapter, ready to move on. The cons of property management is it can grind you down, right? There's a lot of work to it. And so I was just ready to move on. And now I get a chance to work with clients on an individual basis and just really help walk through what we're doing here and meet really cool people and see them start their path to the summit of passive income. That's
right. The Passive Income Summit Sherpa, Mike Stetson. All right. So Lee also had another question about the property itself that we're highlighting. The property says 2 or 3 year lease, but which one is it actually? Do you know that?
I don't know yet, Lee. It's still under construction. So this property is scheduled to finish in about 2 weeks. So we won't know the exact lease term until somebody does sign a lease, but I do know it'll either be 2 or 3 years. It will not be 1 year.
Okay, great. I'm going to throw a tough one at you because we got time, and feel free to answer that you don't know, right? But okay. Chad Willis has a question here. How much are those apartments across the street renting for? Is that something that's under your purview? Is that kind of like an MJ job?
Yeah, I don't know, but I do know when I looked at this house that those apartments across the street have some very colorful doors. Not very often that I see a nice baby blue, a yellow, reds, very, very colorful setup across the street.
I feel like there's something behind you saying that it's a colorful setup. What does that mean?
Yeah, no, just that it was a nice, I don't know, probably 20 unit apartment building, and all the doors were painted in rainbow colors. I thought that was
okay. So you're just flexing your muscle on, like you are very familiar with it. You just don't know exactly what they're renting for. I see what you're doing here, Stetson. It's a nice humble brag.
I've seen that house there, Chad.
I've seen it. All right. Guillermo Montes asks, would it be more difficult to find a proper tenant for this type of house? And I would imagine that should end with than a typical type of JWB house. Is there any more difficult to find a tenant here?
That's another great question, Guillermo. You do run out of, I'll say you run out, but your pool of renters at a $1,600 a month rent is smaller than your pool of renters at $1,000. So there are less people out there, but that doesn't mean they're not out there, right? So there's plenty of people that are still in this price range that are looking for this particular property. And once again, it will correlate more towards area of town. So this particular area of Jacksonville, Murray Hill, where this property is located, rents are just higher. So you're not, I would say at a premium or out of line with the market. There's plenty of people that are living and renting in Murray Hill. You just have to pay more to live in there than some other areas of Jacksonville.
Yeah, that makes sense, Mike. And I would say, to put a little more context to it, you're not really competing with people that are going to be renting at another, like you're not competing against another JWB house as much as other houses in the area, right? People that want to rent in Murray Hill is this like kind of like up and coming hipster area to a certain extent, right? There's like, you can walk to a coffee shop at Murray Hill. So you're probably just competing with other houses in the area. And I feel like JWB has done a great job of branding themselves as superior property managers with a superior product that would appeal to anybody at whatever level of rent they're actually looking at. Is that kind of a fair assumption?
Yeah. And I think it's another good point I want to touch on too, where you don't necessarily have to have a scarcity mentality when you're looking to rent out a property. there will be less people looking for a $1,600 rent than a $1,000 a month rent, but there's still plenty of people out there. The real question to be answered is, let me find the right person, right? So you really want to focus more on that individual that's going to be there for a couple of years, that's comfortable with that rent amount. Those individuals are out there. It's just really incumbent on your property manager or yourself, if you're doing it yourself, to find those individuals. But don't think they're not out there, right? And I think sometimes that's something that we kind of get a little nervous about is vacancies are happening and I got to get my home rented out fast. And let me just, if the first person that's borderline qualifiable, let me move them in. That's not the key to success, right? You really want to do your homework, make sure you're moving in the right individual with the best chance for them to be there for multiple years.
Let's put some value out there, Mike, with your experience as a property manager. Like, let's say somebody's trying to run their own property management company. What should they look for that tells them that the renter is going to be there long term? Like, what are you looking for?
Yeah, I would say the first thing that jumped into my mind is I know what I'm not looking for is somebody that needs to move in tomorrow, right? The person that calls me up and says, hey, it's Friday, it's Thursday, I need to move in Monday. That's a big red flag, right? It goes back to that comment. I want to rent my house fast, not to the person that's got to move in tomorrow. There's a big reason why they usually do. So what I would say is really keys to look for are, most importantly, is previous rental history. I do find if I had to point to one thing, it's how do they take care of their previous house? How do they take care of the house before that? And you really want to go back to landlords in time and really get a gauge of how do they take care of the property? Did they pay their rent on time? Would you rent to them again? That previous landlord history is going to be the best judge of how they're going to take care of your property.
So JWB has that conversation with the two previous landlords. Is that how you get that data?
Yeah, we used to do that very extensively. I would say now we're really able to leverage technology, and we're able to get the same results from that phone call to the previous landlord by doing the credit check, the background pull, doing some analytics, and using technology to generate the same information.
Love it, man. Technology for the win. Marilyn Cotterman asks, what is the estimated amount needed for 25% down payment, including taxes, closing costs, et cetera? Should I pop this thing back on and we go deeper into the sheet here?
Sure, yeah. And to give you an idea, Marilyn, it really is going to depend on your down payment. So if we're looking at conventional financing, if we're doing 25% down, the only thing we'll need to add into that will be the closing costs. So if you just go over just a little bit, Pablo, you'll be able to see in that rental assumption box right below that, we've got the $60,000 down payment. So that's based off of your $240,000 purchase price, 25% down. And then we're going to use 2.5% of the purchase price for a very reasonable approximation of your closing costs. So that's where that comes from. So total out of pocket for this house with 25% down is going to be $66,000.
There you go, Marilyn. Ask and you shall receive. And let's see what we got here. We got Chad Willis with another great question. After a resident moves out, what is the average time to get a new resident into the home?
But around 50 days. I'd say we're usually averaging 45, 50 days is your total downtime from move out to move in. And I'll just break it down for you real quickly, where when somebody moves out, our team's going to go over there, take possession of the home, right? We're going to change the locks, put together the scope for all the repairs, and then we send that over to you to get your approval on it, and then we do all the work. So all that time to get it back rent ready takes 11 days on average is where we're at. And then your next renter is going to be moving in about 35, days after that is generally how things will break down. So once again, we don't really expect that renter that's going to be there for 2 to 3 years to be moving in the day after I make it available. Usually your best renter is the individual that says, hey, it's the end of October, my lease is up November, right? What do you have in December? So there's some general lead time that you're going to be looking for. Going back to good tells of a good renter you want to work with is somebody who's organized, who's proactive, who's looking out in the future. Those are going to be good signs.
Are those assumptions, right? Is like those 50 days averaged out to about, like you said, 4.5 years that they leave. That's all built into the estimate that you're giving the investors, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, it's a great point, Pablo. So, when that move out happens, let's say 54 months from now, just using the averages, that's when you're going to have that big bulk of your maintenance expense. So it's not like it happens every single year like clockwork. It's really going to be a big spike. So that's where it's important to prepare, have money set aside. And when we are looking at our returns and on our spreadsheets, we're taking that essentially average expenses and averaging it out over the 4 years that you're going to have your home occupied.
Perfect, perfect. So Guillermo Montes asks, do you do inspections of the property during the lease period to avoid anomalies?
We can, where we're happy to do an inspection for any client if you want us to send out our property inspector. We don't do it standard across the board. If you walk it out a little bit, today that we manage over 3,500 houses. So it becomes a big logistical challenge to inspect 3,500 houses, and that becomes a big cost that we don't really want to pass along to our clients when it really doesn't provide a lot of value to have that annual inspection, we find. We're happy to do one. So if you ever want one done or your experience is a little bit different, I'm happy to send over our property inspector, but it is not part of our typical management standard protocol. So we do charge $75 to have our inspector go out there.
That being said, though, Mike, you guys, the houses for JWB are all clustered pretty densely into specific areas where you have somebody in general, like an MJ, that's always kind of in the area. So if there is something weird going on, you do have an organic boots on the ground type of thing. Is there a system behind that, or is that just kind of like, you know, he just knows what to look for and he'll bring something up? Do you have any stories around that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, we're going to have eyeballs on, like you were mentioning, between our property inspector, our, you know, leasing team, our superintendents. We have eyeballs on properties pretty regularly, right? And they're all painted the same, so they're branded, so they stand out to our team when we're looking for items that are cause for alarm. We will follow up, right? If there's something that, hey, we need to see what's going on with this property, we'll notify our property management team. We'll follow up and make sure we get an assessment of what's going on. So you've got that exterior kind of accountability. But what I find is actually a better way to get the assessment of the inside of the property is not by scheduling an inspection 2 weeks from now, right? Because we've done that. And what you find is people know you're coming. So their roommate moves. Their pit bull goes to the aunt's house for the weekend, right? So that's not the best way to really assess the property. What we do is we're going to leverage our vendors, our plumbers, electricians, houses when our need maintenance, when something happens, that's when we're able to get inside and get that real world assessment of the property. Our vendors essentially are an extension of our team, and they become our eyeballs and our ears, and they can alert our property management team to things inside the property that we want to get corrected. So it's not about that formal inspection, but it's leveraging your teams and having systems in place to get the same results.
Glad we went there, man. That was really good context. Zach Correa asks, aloha, Stet.
Aloha.
Yeah, aloha. What is a good return on investment to look for when investing in rental properties?
Yeah, I would say that's really going to depend on your market and what you're looking for, right? So it's not one size fits all. When we're looking at properties in Jacksonville with you know, JWB, I say our properties that we're going to be targeting are going to have a return between 9 to 11%, because most of our clients are buying with conventional financing. So that's how I'm usually going to express our returns, in that 9 to 11% range. But there's markets that have different rationales for investing, right? And so you can buy a property in a different area of the country and maybe your return expectations are different. It could be higher cash flow. It could be lower cash flow. It could be more appreciation oriented. So the returns that you're going to, I guess, quantify as acceptable or good are going to be unique to each investor and the market that you're looking in. But I would say to really analyze the numbers, how are they derived? Where are they coming from? Let's be critical when we're analyzing what we're being presented with. And then do we feel confident that that will result over time, right? And that's one thing that I'd like to communicate to individuals is it's a lot easier to put together a spreadsheet and here's what should happen than to know what's happening 4 years, 5 years from now. So really do your assessment, analyze the numbers, look at them critically, but what you're going to be, define as an acceptable return or a good return is going to be unique to market and individual, I would say.
I think that's a good answer, man. Chad Willis with another great question. So we mentioned this team before, right? When a repair is needed, does JWB have a team that will fix the issue, or is it a third party?
Yeah, it's not someone on our payroll, right? I mean, we don't have plumbers and electricians or a bunch of handymen that, are on our staff, okay? What we do is we're going to leverage handymen, plumbers, electricians that are building our houses, that are rehabbing our houses. Those are the vendors that we use for our service calls, right? So you're able to really leverage your volume. For our electricians is a good example. They like those $4,000, $5,000 total house rewiring jobs that we give them. So we're going to expect really good pricing when we got to replace a breaker, right? We're able to use the same teammates, so we get the benefits of the warranty, the customer service, and really we've got line item pre-negotiated pricing with our vendors for the majority of our service calls, so we know exactly what we're going to be paying.
And Chad, I can add a little context to this one too, right? Because number one, I came from the construction industry before I got into marketing. And number two, I am a JWB vendor, right? I am not on JWB's payroll. I know the experience, right? In order for JWB to hire your services, they put you through the ringer, man. Like I had to, like we do yearly business planning with them. They take the same outlook as they do to their clients and to their residents as they do to their vendors, right? So you have to show how you are, key tied in, and they keep the same people for a long time, and they quite frankly treat you really, really well, right? So I would assume that the plumbers, the electricians that are building what is it, like 300, 400 homes a year, Mike?
Yeah,
you guys
just
build?
on new construction, that's about right.
Yeah. So not only do they have this like long-term outlook of partnership with JWB as I do, but also coming from having been a subcontractor and a general contractor myself, I can tell you that if I am dealing with the 800-pound gorilla that builds all the homes and does all these things, I'm not going to nickel and dime them when they're, when one of their clients needs the toilet fixed, right? And it is the bargaining power that JWB has because of the scope of what they require is very different than what a property management company that has a couple plumbers here and there and a nice network can have, because I've experienced it on both sides. So Mike Foster asks, and I guess this is coming back to the whole your background checks. Does your I'm trying to rephrase this in a way that it stands by itself. Mike Foster asks, does your tenant placement policy mean that you exclude first-time renters without renting history?
No, we won't exclude them, right? I would say there's, people go to college, right? People move out of their parents' house. With millennials, I guess it's just later than it used to be. But yeah, that's normal. I guess that's a reasonable, I don't have any rental history. So what we're going to do to offset that is increase your security deposit. It all comes down to risk. If you have zero rental history, I have no reason to believe you wouldn't be a good renter, but we will increase your security deposit to offset the unknown.
Yeah, there you go. And you have the credit report and job history and other stuff that you can, that is a behavior indicator, right? Yeah,
absolutely. But I would say, once again, rental history is the most important. So if you don't have any rental history, we will generally increase your security deposit.
Excellent. Okay. So Misty asks, if an investor decides to sell a property, does JWB resell it to a new investor, or does the investor sell to a retail buyer?
Ideally, you're going to sell it to a retail buyer. But we're going to be here to assist you. You're never on your own with this. Now, ideally, investors are not the individuals that pay the most for properties. So in an ideal scenario, we wouldn't want to take your property that you're selling, Misty, and then turn it around to sell it to another one of our investors, because you're going to get essentially an investor offer. And what we would like to do is, ideally, renter moves out. So we fix up the property a little bit, put it on the market, and sell it to a retail buyer who's going to give you that highest offer. And just be like any other real estate transaction.
Yeah, there you go. Love it. I just got to say, man, we still got 28 people on with us. We've been on for an hour and 50 minutes. This is awesome, man. You having a good time, Mike? Are you having a good time?
Absolutely. Crushing records.
Awesome. Crushing records, man. Gregg is going to have so much FOMO. All right. Mike Foster asks, do new renters get to see the house before signing a lease, or instead does JWB simply assign an available house to them sight unseen?
No. I mean, I was just thinking it'd be really make things easier, I guess, if I could just tell people where they were going to live. Unfortunately, there's too much individuality and self-say, and so we can't just dictate where people are going to live. But I would say, generally speaking, people are driving around the neighborhood and they see the house, they see the sign, they call us, is generally so the number one lead source there. So they're able to see the house. Once it's finished with construction, we'll let them in there. But here's another cool little thing is, even if it's a new construction or renovation house that's not done yet, so we can't let you into that house, we could probably let you into one around the corner. So we can still advance the conversation and still get somebody committed to a property, even though it's not technically ready to show. So people are going to be walking through, seeing their house. We've got the pictures online. People do move from all over the country. So you may not physically walk through the house, but you're going to get that walkthrough, I'd say, before you sign a lease.
Got it. Roger Evans, I want you, I see that you're still here, so I'm going to ask this question, and I want you kind of on call here on the chat, because I'm not sure if I'm going to read this correctly. But he says, Roger Evans asks, does JWB show any preferential treatment to an investor if there are two exact homes on the same road area that are vacant and a renter is looking to rent?
Yeah, good question. So I would say no, right? We don't show any preferential treatment towards any particular investor, one versus the other. We're not going to play favorites there. But I will bring a little bit more attention to the house that has the longer days on market, right? So let's say I've got two houses very close by to each other. One just hit the market today and one's been on the market for 2 weeks. Probably going to give a little bit more attention to the home that's been on the market for 2 weeks. But it's not, hey, I like Roger better than Guillermo, so let me send more traffic to Roger's house first. No, our leasing team doesn't care. They probably don't even see who the property owner is. I think they probably can see it, but they don't care. All they really care about is, what is the renter looking for, right? What are their needs? Do you need the 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom? What's your price range? What area of town are you in? What's your price range, right? And then let's find the house that's the best fit. And we're going to prioritize longer days on market.
There you go. So you got that question because you're a pro and you get these questions all the time. I didn't realize that what he was asking was, would you prioritize the vacant house based on the renter or whatever? Anyways, I'm going to shut up and get out of the way here. Okay. Guillermo Montes asks, is this property available for purchase today?
No. One of our clients picked it up, say Tuesday. So
Tuesday. Yeah. There you go, Guillermo. Just a little.
But I've got more for you, Guillermo. Don't be shy. We've got more.
Yeah, we got plenty of houses, Guillermo. Yeah, just peek behind the scenes. Since Gregg is in business planning mode this week, we prepared all the subjects for this week ahead of time because JWB is always prepared. So Chad Willis asks, is there a pet policy? Any additional deposits? Does the investor have a choice to exclude certain pets?
So we do have a pet policy, right? And we're going to be excluding those pets for you, right? And this, once again, kind of goes back to our experience and what we need to do. We are pet friendly. There's a lot of quality people out there that own pets, myself included, right? I've got 1 dog, 4 cats, 2 fish now. It keeps growing. My daughters catch lizards every day, so I probably got 5 lizards in an aquarium somewhere. So we don't rule out pet owners, but we do want to make sure that we cover the risk, right? So we're going to make sure it's not an aggressive dog breed. You can't have a pit bull, German shepherd, any of those aggressive breeds that will violate your insurance policy. So we're going to get all that information there. And we also do collect the non-refundable pet fee for pets. So it's going to be $500, and that is paid by the resident at move-in, and that's going to be sent directly to property owner. So we recognize that there's additional expense with pets, but that doesn't mean it's a good idea to not ever work with a pet owner ever, okay?
All right, there you go. Just quick clarification. If the investor themselves is like, I don't want pets, just no pets, will you be amenable to that or no?
I would say we really want you to be pet accommodating, right? I mean, ultimately, I'd say that this is your property, and we're going to have a conversation about it. But I think the kind of best attitude to have, I would say, is to, let's be open to working with pet owners. That's how we're going to be able to perform the best for you.
Got it. Sounds like you're confident in showing somebody the business case for allowing a reasonable pet policy.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, great. Final question, Mike. We're there, man. Home stretch. Marilyn Cotterman asks, may I ask how many rental properties you have? Are you also a rental property investor, Mike?
Yeah. I've got one, well, if you don't count my primary, one rental property myself. Yep.
All right. There you go, man. There you go. Steph, we did it, dude. An hour and 52 minutes in, dropping knowledge bombs for everybody. We still have 26 people here on the line.
No, I had a great time.
Isn't it great, man? Like, to me, it always hits me that people will spend an hour and, an hour and 22 minutes on a Thursday, middle of the day, to pick your brain, man. It's so like humbling and so gratifying to be able to like help people at scale. So I just want to thank everybody that was with us, our regulars, our new folks. Great questions, great contributions. Really, really appreciate. Mike, you did awesome, dude. I appreciate you, spending time covering for Gregg while he's off there business planning. I see now why they call you the LeBron James of JWB. Not only were you employee number 6, but a champion, and you can do everything, man. I really, really appreciate the time we got to spend together, man. Thank you.
Hey, likewise, Paulo. Anytime. I know got big shoes to fill here for GC, but if you ever need a designated hitter, just let me know.
Awesome, man. And you got a lot of love here, man. Cheddar Willis says, thanks, guys. Appreciate the time and transparency. Marilyn Cotterman, awesome session. Misty, thank you. Brad Ciro, thanks, guys, as usual. Mike Foster, thank you. All the love pouring in from the chat.
Love it, guys.
Thank you all for being here. Next on Tuesday, right? So don't forget, if you want to catch any more of these shows, we have them on notyouravageinvestorshow.com. Easy. I'm going to pop it in here. NotYourAverageInvestorShow.com. You can go there, catch all the resources that we have. On Tuesday, we're going to go into a question that keeps getting asked. Are we in a bubble? Right? I think that is forefront in everybody's mind when we're seeing, the rise of real estate, the state of the economy. We're going to dive deep into it with our usual co-host, the Tony Romo of the show, Gregg Cohen. So we hope to have you there. In the meantime, hope to see you in the Facebook group. And thank you everybody for coming out. And you, Mike, especially, you killed it, buddy.
Hey, thanks, guys. Everyone have a great day.